Hi, we'll get started in just 1 minute. We've still got a couple people I can see trying to connect and get sound going, so we'll just give them 1 more minute to get going. Thanks. All right, we are going to get started. I just want to make sure everyone can see my screen right now. All right, so I'd like to thank you all for attending our little webinar here about solutions to the business challenges that you're going to face when doing budgeting and forecasting as your enterprise grows. Just a couple of housekeeping questions before I get into who I am and so forth, and we kind of get going. All of your phones are on mute. And that's just to avoid background noise, people putting on hold and music on hold and so forth. When you are at the end of the webinar, we will open it up for any kind of questions, and you can use the GoToWebinar interface there to ask those questions at the end. So just kind of hang on to those as we get going, just so you kind of know where it is. This is really an educational webinar. It doesn't really focus on a particular product. But let's go ahead and kind of get going onto all of this. So let's talk about who I am first. So my name is Alan Whitehouse, and I am with True Sky, and I am the Chief Software Architect. And True Sky is a software development company, and we specialize in building a corporate performance management solution called True Sky. It allows you to do budgeting, forecasting, planning for really any type of business model that you might think about, whether it be financial, capital expenditures, compensation, projects, revenue, sales forecasting, and so forth. My background is I have been doing this now for about 24 years. I've been working with corporate performance management solutions such as ours, business intelligence, as well as ERP type solutions. So my background is heavily in that finance and performance management and analytics type of area. I have worked in my 24 years with clients in multiple industries. I don't know if there's any true industry, again, depending on how you classify things, that I haven't at least dabbled in at once, as well as a wide range of sizes. My smallest client, maybe, 500,000 a year in revenue, or even less than that, 250,000 a year in revenue, 100,000 a year in revenue, upwards to, I think my largest is like 20 billion in revenue that I've worked with. So again, I've kind of run the gamut there. So what we're going to talk about is based on a lot of that experience of seeing organizations go from being very small in their budgeting and planning and forecasting processes to increasing in size. So let's set the stage here a little bit as I'm going through and talking about things today. And I'm just going to make sure that we are all good with any kind of questions and chat stuff here. Make sure everyone can hear and so forth. All right. So couple things, groundwork, so you know. If I use the term budget, that is the same as if I use the term plan, as if I use the term forecast. All right. For the discussions that we're going to have here today, these really are interchangeable items. I know sometimes people think forecast, they think sales forecast as opposed to budget, which they're thinking financial, or sometimes forecast is more further thinking, like 5 or 6 years out and at a more summary level or what have you. And again, different organizations approach it differently, but for the discussions that we're going to have here today, these are all kind of interchangeable terms, so I will use them interchangeably. If you hear me use the words template, that's some sort of data input form and so forth. If I use the word contributor, that is somebody that is putting in data input. They're typing in the numbers into whatever your application is. If you use the term, or hear me use the term reviewer, that's the same as an approver. That's somebody that's going to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the number. Now, this presentation is going to be a lot about those organizations that are now starting to move using Excel today, but starting to outgrow it. That's going to be one of the pains that you are going to feel as you get larger, is the pains that Excel bring. We do kind of talk about this transition from Excel, because that is the #1 tool that people use for doing budgeting and forecasting today. So that's kind of the focus around a lot of this. And most importantly, that you have to all agree to, that is your presenter, myself, am unbelievably witty as well as handsome. So as long as we use this as our groundwork for going forward, we'll all be really good. So let's talk about the issues that you're going to face as your organization grows and the challenges you're going to get hit with when you're doing budgeting, forecasting, planning as you go forward. So one of the things I like to do when I start this whole conversation out is to review, why do we budget? And again, I think this is a very good question to ask yourself each time you go into a budget cycle. And I've kind of broken this down into 4 different areas for why you might be doing budgeting. So first, we budget because we have to. Now, that seems a little frivolous kind of answer at the start, but if you really think about it, and if you asked any of your people, why are you doing budgets? Well, that's because you have to. Maybe you have some form of requirement put on you by your board of directors, by your owners. Maybe it's by a regulatory body that you have, or maybe you need to get a forecast from your bank to keep a line of credit there. So you have compliance issues. Because we have to is a valid reason for why you're budgeting, not necessarily because you want to, but because you have to. Now, why else might you budget? Well, you might budget for some financial predictability. Maybe part of your budget is to get to a cash flow statement at the end of the day, so you can see how well you're going to do on cash, so you can pay your employees when it comes September or October, as an example. Or maybe you budget to understand the business drivers. You know, maybe your business, you're a manufacturer and you rely heavily on commodities. Well, you're going to budget to understand how many tons of raw material you need, and should you be thinking ahead of buying futures or something like that to kind of protect yourself for price fluctuations. You might be budgeting to understand units, how many people you need to hire, or so forth. So again, you're budgeting to understand the business drivers within your organization. And some people budget to manage performance. Obviously, this is how you're holding people accountable. Maybe certainly on the sales side, this is very common. Now, how you're budgeting and why you're budgeting today might be because of one of these reasons, 2 of these reasons, 3 of these reasons, or all 4 of these reasons. And what people tend to forget is why you're doing your budget today will change over the course of time. So today you may be all about budgeting for financial predictability because you're worried about the cash flow. But 3 years from now, you may be having to budget primarily to understand the drivers, you know, what kind of raw materials you need, and because you've got some covenants placed on you by your banks to keep your line of credits alive. And that may be the primary driver of your budget. So why you're budgeting is going to change and evolve and morph over time as your organization grows and changes and morphs over time. And what I'm going to put to you is that each time before you start a budgeting cycle, you should sit down and ask yourself your question as to why are we doing this budget? What is our goal? What is forcing us to do this? Because then that's going to adjust the type of data you collect, how you collect it, who you collect it from. Because again, if it's financial predictability, you might be getting data from one group of people. If it's the business drivers, it might be a different group of people. If it's to manage performance, it might be a third group of people. So again, ask yourself this question each and every time you go into a budget cycle, because I've seen too many clients that started out one way and they continue to budget for that very same reason over their life cycle. And at the end of the day, then they're confused as to why are we not getting the data that we need at the end of the day to manage our business. So again, every budget cycle, ask yourself this question. So now let's talk about the elements of an enterprise budget. And this is what's really going to drive the whole rest of this presentation as we go forward. Well, it's composed of 3 different, I'm going to call them pillars right now: people, data, and process. All right. So under the people pillar, we're going to talk about involvement, how involved they are in the budget. We're going to talk some about accountability, and we're going to talk about time. And again, these are the things that I'm going to review as we go forward. This is just kind of giving you a preview of what we're going to talk about. When you come to the data pillar, we're going to talk about the level of detail you're budgeting to. We're going to talk about budgeting for drivers, how you need to think more about external information, and then the timeliness of your numbers. And then we're going to talk a little bit about process. And that's the accessibility to your solution that does your budgeting, your security, how visible you are with the process, what kind of confidence you have in your numbers at the end of the day, and the duration and the frequency of how often and how long you budget for. Now, all of these areas that I'm going to talk about, the thing to keep in mind is that the more any one of these items breaks down, whether it be involvement or the timeliness or your security, one way or the other, that's ultimately going to affect the accuracy of your numbers. All right. So now we're going to kind of go into each of these different areas and talk about some of the challenges that you're going to face as you go forward. Well, let's talk about that people pillar and their involvement in the budget. And this is getting the user involved in the process. Now, when people talk about involvement, the first thing they're thinking about is, are our people physically involved? Who's actually working on the budget? Okay. But I'm going to tell you that one of the things that's just as important as the physical involvement, how long people are spending on the budget, is what is their mental and their emotional involvement with the budget. So I could spend the next 3 weeks working on my budget numbers, but if I don't care at all about those numbers, if I'm not emotionally invested in those numbers, what do you think the quality of those numbers is going to be? Well, obviously, if I don't care about the numbers, if I don't care about this process, then I'm not going to put as much effort and quality into those numbers. So as you go forward and as you add more and more people to your budgeting cycle, just don't think about their physical involvement. You need to think about how to get your people mentally involved so they're actually truly thinking about it, not just doing it while they're multitasking 23 other different things, but also how do you get them emotionally involved in the budget? How do you get them so they feel like, you know what, me putting in quality numbers actually manages or actually makes a difference to the organization, and at the end of the day will positively affect me in my role in the organization. So if you don't get your people mentally and emotionally involved in your numbers, your accuracy over the course of time is going to fail. And again, as you add more and more people, that degree of, those little inaccuracies are going to magnify as you're going forward. So again, always think about how you're going to get them involved in the process. Talk about accountability for a little bit. I work with a lot of clients, and you'd be surprised by how many I ask, what are the ramifications if I put in a budget and at the end of the year, I was off by 100% or 50% or 1,000%? And you'd be surprised by truly in how many organizations there is no accountability to the numbers that people are putting in. So like many things in life, if you're not held accountable to your actions, you don't tend to work on them very hard. So think about, driving down the freeway, right? If the speed limit is 60 miles an hour on the freeway, but there was never any negative downside to doing 120 miles an hour and you were late, you'd probably always go 120 miles an hour, right? Even though maybe it's unsafe. But there are negative repercussions to speeding, right? Tickets, loss of license, and so forth. So there is accountability. So when you're doing budgeting, you need to have accountability as well. People need to be held accountable to these numbers. That's the only way you're going to actually get them to spend time on it and make sure their numbers are good. Now, that accountability can either be positive or negative. It can be the carrot or the stick. And you'll have to decide for each of your individuals what is the best way. So do you reward people for coming in right on their budgets? So again, maybe there are prizes at the end of the year for whoever got closest to their budget, again, as a way to encourage that. Or maybe there are some negative ramifications. I mean, you're going to tie this into performance management with their accountability, such that if their budget's always off, people need to be held accountable to that. I don't know in your organization what the negative downside is going to be or the positive upside is going to be. But there has to be some repercussions for your numbers not being close and being accurate. Now, again, that always has to be tempered. Within any business, there are things that you were not expecting, right? There is a housing market crash. There is a a war someplace, there is, a strike, stuff that was never anticipated. But for day-to-day stuff, you have to hold your people accountable if you want good quality numbers. And again, as you add more and more people into the mix, people that don't do this all the time aren't as emotionally invested in their involvement, as we talked about earlier, this has become a bigger problem. So you're going to have to think about keeping them accountable. All right, let's talk about time. All right, so almost everyone on this call, I would assume, does not have unlimited time in the day. You go to work, you work from 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever your normal is, and then you rush to get home. And you've got evening activities. Maybe you've got kids, right? You've got to feed the kids. You've got to get to soccer practice, hockey practice, whatever the time of year is, right? You got to rush here. You've got to deal with the refrigerator repair person that's coming to fix the fridge, right? We all have demands on our time. When you're doing the budget, things are no different, right? I've got my normal daily work activity that I have to do from that 9 to 5 point of view, all of those tasks that I have to do day in and day out. And now people are asking me to do the budget. So how do I find time for that, right? I've still got to do normal work and I got to do the budget, but the budget's got to get done by a certain timeline. So what do? Do I end up working longer, which adds to my stress, which means I shortchange my family or I rush to get through it? Or do I, let other jobs just go by the wayside and the rest of the business falters while I work on the budget? So this is something I don't think people realize a lot when they're doing the budget, whether it be once a year, once a quarter, once a month, is that people actually need time to work on the budget. And it needs to be built into their schedule. So if I've got all of my daily activities that go for 8 hours and now you want me to work on the budget, well, you've got to find me more time, because it really is unrealistic to expect a quality product if you're forcing people to work on Sundays or after hours and so forth. So how do you do that? Well, you got to learn to spread the workload. So when it comes budget season, the person that's working on the budget, you've got to find a way to take away some of their other activities and kind of spread that workload to other people in the organization so they can actually focus on the budgets. Because again, if they're rushing to get through the budget because they don't have any of that time, you're going to get a substandard quality product at the end of the day. And I think that makes common sense, but I think people forget about that. They just budget time, figure out a way to do it. And that's going to give you bad numbers. So again, give your people more time. Sometimes this is because you stretch out the budget cycle. Sometimes you just take away some of their duties. All right. So those are the first 3 things that we're going to talk about. I'm going to go back to the pillars here really quick to kind of show you the pillars there again. So those are the pillars. So we're talking about the people pillar that we kind of gone through, which is that involvement, accountability, and time. Now we're going to move on to the data pillar here. So let's talk about details. So when I ask people, what level of detail should you be budgeting to? Almost inevitably, the answer that I get back from people is, we want more detail. We need way more detail in all these areas. And I'm actually going to ask you to think a little bit differently. And this is the concept of the forest for the trees and the trees for the forest. That I don't necessarily want you to try to capture more and more detail. What I want you to do is actually capture less information, but focus more on less, if that makes sense. And think of this as the proverbial 80-20 rule that we're always talking about. In your organization, when you're doing your budget, right, there are probably 20% of the items that you have your people budget to that actually matter, and 80% don't. And that 20% that matter probably accounts for 80% of your revenue or your costs. So I would put to you that a better way going forward is, rather than trying to capture everything in the utmost detail, is start to limit how much you're actually capturing and have your people really focus more on that. So find those 2, 3, 4 pieces of information that you want your people to budget. Maybe it's focusing on sales revenue to just your top 5 customers. Maybe it's just the 2 or 3 revenue accounts or the 5 or 6 expense accounts that actually at the end of the day truly affect your bottom line. And then basically ignore the rest. Or just copy over last year's actuals and use that for your base of your budget and just up it by a cost of living increase. But really reduce the amount of detail that you're actually budgeting to, but then focus more on that detail. And at the end of the day, unless you're like a direct mailer, postage costs probably aren't material to your business, right? Coffee cups, coffee, water delivery, bottled water delivery, right? That's probably not material at the end of the day to your business. So why do you have your people bother to budget on it? It just sucks up time and sucks up, more importantly, their mental space for that. So again, reduce the amount of detail that you're budgeting to, but capture it and have people really focus on that. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a better quality product. All right. So let's start talking about budgeting the drivers. So very common when you start budgeting out, you're just capturing dollars, right? This is what we predict in sales. This is what we predict our costs are. All right. And I'm going to give you an example here of why it's important to start getting into rates and quantities and not just dollars when you're budgeting. So let's assume that you as an organization in the past, you've predicted $5 million in sales. And you traditionally budget at, let's see, let me do some math here on my phone while we're talking so I can give this example here because I don't have the slide for you. So let's say you budgeted $5 million in sales, right? And traditionally, you sell at $10,000 a piece, okay? Well, that means you are going to manufacture, build, store, warehouse, ship 500 items, okay? So scenario 2, at the end of the day, you're still going to predict $5 million in sales, but you've now lowered your sales price from $10,000 to $2,500, which now means that is 2,000 items that you have to manufacture, warehouse, ship out. That's 4 times the volume. And that 4 times the volume is probably going to have other ripple effects throughout your organization. You might need to order more materials overseas from your suppliers. And if you don't order it now, after you wait the 12 weeks to get it from the cargo ship overseas, you've missed sales, you've missed opportunities, or you have to fly it in and there goes your profit margin, right? Or if you've got 4 times the volume, you might need more production runs, which means more equipment, more employees, or you might need more warehouse space. So if you're only budgeting the dollars, you don't know these things. So you really have to get to budgeting the drivers as you go forward, because that's what you're going to need to kind of make smart business decisions going forward. All right. So again, get to those drivers, quantities, rates, units. Especially if you're using Excel, the math at the end of the day for dollars will work itself out very, very easily. External information. Okay. Too often, I see people budgeting kind of in a vacuum. What do they look at? They look at last year's actuals. They look at the budget for the last 2 years and the actuals for the last 3 years. And that's what they use solely to base their budget going forward. What they're not looking at is that things that are going outside of the 4 walls of your organization, such as our major competitor is now opening up a new plant right in our backyard. Or we bring in all of our supplies from another country, and there's now a trade war going on with that country, and tariffs are going to be increasing. Therefore, our costs are going to be increasing, right? You really need to make sure as you grow, you need to take into account all the things that are going on in the world around you. The world, I know it's cliche, is becoming a smaller and smaller place. You are facing competition from different parts of the world that you never did before. Geography is no longer a barrier to doing business, or it is not as big of a limitation as it used to be. So if you're not taking into account what's going around, across the country or across the globe in your industry or in related industries, you're going to get left behind. All right, so you've really got to work in that external information more and more as you get bigger to become more and more. And this is just something that's going to affect everyone, not just necessarily as you grow. Timeliness of your data. Now, this is different than time, which is how much time you're giving people. How old are your numbers? Okay. Right now, today, I see a lot of clients that by the time they get to budget, because they're getting data out of their systems, they have to download it from their host systems, or that be their ERP or their CRM system. They have to dump it into Excel as CSV files. They do a lot of manual manipulation. They send it out, and by the time they get the numbers back, the numbers are already 3 months old, right? So they start the process in June. So I only roll out actuals to my people in June. They get the budget in July. It's done in September. So now I'm budgeting for the next year, but I'm only seeing part of the year from a timeliness point of view to make decisions. My numbers are all outdated, but I got to get the numbers back in by September because I can't get them compiled and ready to go for the board by December, right? So your numbers are never up to date as you would like. And again, we are a world, as I kind of talked about with the external information, that is working on internet time. Things are getting quicker and quicker and quicker. You can't wait 3 weeks to make a decision anymore on things. You've got to move quicker. So as you're going forward, you're going to have to look at ways where you can increase the timeliness of doing your budget. You're going to have to be doing not just a once a year big budget as well. You're going to be doing more and more of those as you go forward. You're going to have to get the data and the process far more streamlined. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Again, this is one of these areas where budgeting applications are really going to help you and getting away from Excel. But you're not going to be able to have outdated data information because you'll be making decisions on old information and your competitors are going to be passing you by. All right, so that is what we've talked about. I'm going to go back to the thing here. That is our data pillar. So now we're going to move on to the process pillar. And this is kind of one of the most painful things that's going to happen as you get larger as an organization is the process that you're working on. So let's talk about the first one, accessibility. How accessible is whatever that budgeting solution you are to your users? Now, your budgeting solution may be Excel worksheets. It may be a budgeting application like True Sky, the best budgeting application out there. It might be a function of your ERP system or your CRM system or whatever the case may be. So when I ask how accessible is it, that's something you got to do, because right now you got to remember, people are working time into their day-to-day to get on their budgets. As you grow, odds are you are going to be adding people that are working on schedules that are non-standard, right? So you may have people that, I work from 10 till 3, and then I'm back on from 7 till 9 at night, right? That's a deal I've made. So you have to make sure with these working on your budgets and wanting people to have better numbers that your system is accessible as possible. When the urge strikes me and I've got a brainstorm on a budget, I want to be able to get in there right away and get those numbers in without having to jump through 25 different hoops. So as you grow, you have to find ways that people can access whatever your budgeting solution is as quickly as possible without only having to be within the 4 walls of your organization, and that they can access it outside of normal business hours. Because again, that's kind of more how we're working as a society now. If you limit them to only being able to work it at a certain time and place on the budget, again, your numbers are going to be restricted. You're not going to have the quality stuff that you're looking for at the end of the day. All right. Next, security. When I talk about security of the budget numbers, the first thing that probably popped into your mind is, are our numbers secure enough? Okay, and that's a valid question. But I'm also going to put to you that in some examples of companies I work with, and as they grow, their numbers are a little bit too secure. They restrict to such a degree what people are allowed to see and to work with that it actually hampers them from getting good quality numbers. So as an example, many organizations can say, you can only see the numbers for Department A and not Department B, right? So, but Department B may have a lot of good ideas. Department B may know things, the person that's budgeting for Department B may know things that Department A doesn't know, right? So that sharing information, that opening things up a little bit is going to ultimately, at the end of the day, get you higher quality numbers. Now, one of the things that you do want to make sure is there's some level of security, right? So you may not want detailed salary information exposed to the whole organization. So yeah, obviously there are things on security, right? But from Department A to Department B, is there really that need to have that level of security on the day-to-day things, whether it be sales, whether it be costs? And that's something I would like you to think about, because obviously providing all of that information about what your coworkers are budgeting may give you some greater insights into how you should be budgeting. So again, this is one of the things that you should be thinking on a go-forward basis. Visibility, all right? How many of you out there, especially if you're managing the process, have complete visibility into the budget cycle. You really don't given Excel, and that's one of the downsides of Excel at the end of the day, is that you don't know who's worked on it or when they've worked on it or how far they are until budgets are due, right? And then that's when everyone starts to come asking for more time, right? And that's one of the things that a budgeting application will really help you with going forward, is you have that concept of who's done what and when and who's been approved and so forth. But that being said, as you go bigger, as you get more people involved, you're actually going to get less and less visibility. If it was only 2 people working on the budget, great. You probably know exactly where they stand. If you've got 100 people working on the budget, all with their own Excel spreadsheets, all on their desktop, you really don't know where it stands. So you don't know, are you running late, or do we have any problems that we need to head off at the pass, and so forth. So you need to look to increase the visibility that you have as whoever's managing the process. This would be the concept of regular check-ins with your users. So rather than waiting until 5 p.m. on Friday when budgets are due and ask, okay, can I have the budget now? You're going to want to check in more often and ask, how are you doing? Are you done yet? How close are you? Do you have any questions? The managers that are going to be approving these numbers should be doing the same thing. That way you know exactly where you stand. You can see who's struggling and having trouble, right? Not everyone takes to doing budgeting off the bat. And then you'll know at the end of the day where you need to spend some more time and effort, and you'll have that greater visibility. And are you going to have your budgets done at the right time? Confidence. All right. This is a tough one with budgeting, and this is one of the biggest things that I see start to fail as organizations get bigger and bigger, and more people involved in the process, whether it be through the approval process or the review process, whether you're contributing or you're reviewing. You've probably heard in your organization, hey, those aren't my numbers. I don't know where those numbers came from. I don't know how they got there. You can't hold me accountable to those numbers, right? And that's one of the downsides, again, of Excel as you grow, is that you don't have things like audit trails or controls over who is entering those numbers. So I could enter a number, and then 6 months later, somebody could change that number, and we have no idea who changed it or why, right? And that's going to lead to a loss of confidence. And you're going to have loss of confidence in a couple different areas. You're going to have loss of confidence in the whole process, because people say, oh, it's budget time again. These numbers don't go anywhere. They always get changed. I have no idea what they mean, that kind of thing. You are going to lose confidence in the numbers themselves because they seem to always be changing with no explanation, or you might be losing confidence in the people as you go forward. So as you go forward, you're going to have to strive to make sure that people don't lose confidence in the process. You're going to have to put controls in place to control who can make edits and when they can make edits. You're going to have to put controls into place that communicate changes to the process or changes to the numbers to all parties involved. Otherwise, people just kind of give up and they say, you know what, these budget numbers, they always change anyhow. I put my numbers in, it doesn't matter because they're going to change them anyhow. What does it matter? So you're going to have to fight this as you get big, again, because if people can't confide, if people aren't confident in the numbers at the end of the day, how are they going to build business plans around it? How are they going to hit their objectives if they don't think these numbers are going to be what they're going to be? So again, as you go forward, you're going to lose confidence as you go forward there. All right. And oh, by the way, before I drop off, what we're talking about here is also in a white paper that we have available as a download for this. So if after you get off this webinar, if some of this you'd like a little bit more information on, go ahead and send us information, and we've got a white paper that covers this and some more tips and tricks around how you deal with all of these kind of things. So again, I should have said that up front. Sorry about that, but I'm just saying it now. All right, let's talk about duration. How long does your budget cycle take? All right, as you get bigger, as you involve more people, as you budget for more departments or business units or product lines, or you add more kind of things to the budget, such as capital expenditures or project budgeting or compensation or revenue forecasting, whatever the case may be. The trend is that the duration of how long the budget cycle goes is going to increase, right? Because you're going to have more work preparing for the budget. You're doing all these Excel workbooks and worksheets that you're planning on and have to create and manipulate and link and so forth. And then your people are going to need more time because they have to think a lot of different ways during the budget. And unfortunately, the duration stretches out. Now that goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the timeliness of your information. As the duration increases, well, the timeliness of your data decreases and your numbers become less valid. So as you go forward, you're going to have to look at ways that you can decrease the duration of how long it takes you to manage a budget cycle. All right. So how do you do that? Well, in Excel, it's pretty well impossible. Excel is what it is. It's a fantastic tool, but at the enterprise budgeting level, it tends to break down. And that's where you're going to have to look at some form of budgeting application like a True Sky if you want to decrease that duration. Because again, they're going to have things like automatic linkages to your back-end data. They're going to have the ability to create one item and roll it out to 1,000 users and not have to recreate that same Excel workbook 1,000 different times, or that merge is going to go away completely. So as you grow, you can't keep the duration. You got to keep the duration in check, because we're going to really lead to the concept of the next thing, which is the budget frequency. Okay. A lot of you out there today may only be budgeting once a year. And again, as I talked a little bit about the world and the internet and all of that, we are in an ever shrinking world, and you've got more competition. And budgeting once a year is no longer going to cut it. Okay. At a minimum, as an organization, you need to be looking at doing a once a year big budget and then quarterly reforecasts, right? That way you're able to take an account for changes that are going on in the world around you. Ideally, you should be getting down to monthly reforecasting. Maybe it's not everything. Maybe it's just certain key accounts, key drivers in your organization that you're budgeting for, but you can't just do the once a year. If you do, again, what you're going to find is that you're not adjusting to changes in the world quick enough, and you're getting left behind. This is another one of those areas where it's very difficult as you go forward with a tool like Excel, and you need to look at some kind of budgeting application to help you deal with this more often. Because again, in Excel, as you grow, and I have seen companies do this, they put in a whole team that's doing nothing but managing the budget and juggling all the Excel workbooks. And the cost of that to your organization is huge. All right. So let's talk a little bit about a couple things, and I'm going to get into some of the common problems that you're going to face and a couple of examples. So as you grow, and what's going to happen with your budget, you're going to keep in mind, you're going to have more people involved. All right. And each of these, you're going to have more people, you're going to capture different types of data, and your process complexity is going to grow exponentially. And each of these is going to add some unique challenges as you go forward. So let's talk a little bit about some of those people challenges. You're going to have an increase in what I'm going to call problem children. Okay. One, you're going to have a wider range of skills. Okay. So some people, let's say you're continuing to use Excel as your interface. You're going to have some people that take to it like a duck to water, right? They jump in, they're comfortable with Excel, they like it, they can manipulate it, boom, 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 they're done, right? They love it. You're going to have some people that are terrified of it, not because they're terrified necessarily of the budget, but they're terrified of whatever application you're using to manage the budget. That could be Excel, it could be something like a True Sky. So as you're getting more and more people involved in the process, you're going to have to put in plans for how you're going to deal with these wider range of skills. That's going to be more training. That's going to be more hand-holding. Sometimes it's going to be sitting down with people and typing it in for them or helping them go click here, type in your number here, and so forth. All right. What you're going to see is an increase of everyone wants it their own way, right? Everyone, again, it's kind of a fact of nature. You want to do things the way you want to do it, not the way somebody else wants to do it, right? So you're going to have to manage that as well, and you have to come up with formats that either make everyone make one group happy and the other group's unhappy, or makes everyone equally unhappy. But that's the only way you're going to have to manage it. You're going to have to figure out what that is, and that's going to change from organization to organization. You're also going to have a huge amount of people that will not be able to deliver on time. And again, in many ways, I say treat these people the same way I treat my teenagers, right? When I say we have to, be out the door at, 5 o'clock, well, guess what? In reality, that means we have to be out the door by 5:30, but I tell them 5 o'clock because I know no matter what, they're never ready on time. And if I tell them 5 o'clock, we're not out the door until 5:30 anyhow. Because, oh, I thought by being ready, you meant I just had to kind of be ready to go, even though I don't have my shoes or my jacket or anything else, ready to go. So you're going to have more and more people that won't deliver on schedule. And that really throws a wrench into your planning cycles. Because if I'm a frontline data contributor, right, and I'm a week late on my budget, well, guess what? The person that's going to approve my budget, they either get less time to approve it or you're backing up all the way down. So these problems just magnify as you get more and more people. Obviously, you're going to have security concerns. Who should be able to see what information, how much, and what and when, and who should be allowed access to information. Again, don't lock it down too much, but at the same on the flip side of that, you don't want all of your confidential business information walking out the front door. Don't forget they're going to have that loss of work time, and most importantly, you have to decide who owns the numbers. So again, this whole concept of, hey, those aren't my numbers. I don't know where those numbers came from. You can't hold me accountable. Why does that happen? More likely than not, I put in my numbers and they went through the approval process. Somewhere down the line, somebody changed the numbers and didn't bother to communicate back to me what that change was or why they made the change. Okay, and that's why you get this. One of the big beliefs I have is that only the frontline people should ever make changes. And reviewers and contributors, or reviewers should only ever give a thumbs up or thumbs down. And if they don't like the numbers, they should kick it all the way back down with explanation as to why the numbers need to be changed and force that frontline person to make the change. That way you get everyone on the same page. All right. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out who owns the numbers and what is your communication plan when numbers change. What are some of the big common data issues you're going to find? Again, complexity is going to increase. Right now, you're just maybe doing SG&A at a dollar basis, but down the road, you're going to do things like compensation or sales forecasting per unit, right? So you're going to add more complexity, and that's going to require more merges and more different input sheets and so forth. You're going to be capturing both drivers and dollars, so again, a little bit more for people to think about. As you add more people, odds are you're adding more spreadsheets if you're still using Excel. Again, a good reason to look at an application like a True Sky where you don't have to juggle 100 or 500 different worksheets, right? And you're not going to have to deal with things like the broken linkages that tend to happen in Excel as you're trying to do all that merge. As you grow and you get more of these, you're also going to have more issues for storing and sharing and backing up kind of things, all right? And then how you do documentation and so forth, all right? And what are some of the process issues that you're going to end up having? Well, people tend to focus on the what and not the why. So again, you're getting more people involved, and they tend to focus on, okay, I want this dollar to be 36, or I want this dollar to be 10,000, right? But they don't spend enough time focusing on why the dollar should be that, not what the dollar is going to be. So you need to keep your people focused, less on the dollars and more about why they're putting those dollars in and why that is important to the organization, okay? Again, you have to be aware that your cycle times are going to increase. You're going to have more effort managing. You're going to have more cost running it. And then you're getting into that yearly, quarterly versus rolling process. And again, these are areas where having a budgeting application are really going to help you going forward as opposed to just using Excel. And at the end of the day, you have to understand who owns the budgeting process. Now, I've had organizations where one person owned, say, compensation, and another person owned sales forecasting, another person owned SG&A and expenses, but they didn't communicate, and they had different timelines for when things are due. But if you're trying to get a consolidated budget, that's not going to work, right? So you need to have one overall owner of the entire process and then make sure everyone else is in line on a go-forward basis. All right, so with that, I'm going to open it up to any kind of questions. Again, I've been doing this for many, many years, worked with a lot of different clients. And I will open up to any questions. I hope you found this a little bit informative. Again, there is a white paper that goes along with this that you can request as you log off here, and we can send you information on how to download it. It gives you a little bit more information. If by chance you're at the point where you are interested in a budgeting solution to get off of Excel and get rid of a lot of the pains that go along with Excel, like that merge, like creating dozens or hundreds of different Excel workbooks, like not having direct integration to your host data systems, like not having workflow approvals and audit trails. We would love to talk to you, right? True Sky is a corporate performance management solution, allows you to budget and forecast and plan against any type of business process imaginable. Direct linkages into your ERP system, a full workflow approval, security layers, all of the kind of stuff that Excel does not have, and that Excel tends to give you headaches with. So we take away all of those headaches that go along with it. We can't make all of your people love doing budgeting and forecasting, but we can sure make it a whole heck of a lot less painful and make your numbers a lot more meaningful. So with that, if you have any questions right now, there is a little question place in the GoToWebinar interface where you can type in questions. I'll stay on the line here for a little bit, and if you want to ask a question about how you're doing budgeting and forecasting, any kind of advice I can give as you grow, go ahead and type it in there now, and I will go ahead and answer the question. Again, before you drop off, I thank you for taking the time out of your day. And again, if you do want to find a little bit more information on True Sky, please go ahead and visit our website. That screen is up, or that information is up on the screen. So opening up for questions. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar today. I thank you all for attending, and I hope you found it informative. Have a great day.